Hello and welcome to the JSA studio. I am your host, as always, Nathan, and today I'm coming at you with the next video in my Big Ten Season in Review series. Today we're going to be talking about the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. They had a really good and interesting year for them. But before we get into talking about that, it is at this point that I'm going to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. It would really help out the channel if you did so. And now with the intro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to do, and that's to get started by starting with Rutgers Season in Review. And in that Season in Review, we're going to start by hitting on some general themes for this team. And this team, really good. This was a really good year for you guys this year. Could have been a little bit better. You won some games that I think maybe you probably shouldn't have, and you also lost some games that I think maybe you probably shouldn't have either. However, when all said and done, 7-5 in the regular season, that's a pretty good deal, especially considering the level of program you've been since Greg Schiano left in 2011, I think, or 2012. I don't remember off the top of my head. So 7-5, you'll take it. You'll take it. That's a good season. That's not just barely eking out a win to get to a bowl game at the end of the year against Michigan State, which you fucking dominated that game. I watched that game live. That you dominated that game. And the main themes this year were the running game with Kyle Monangai, who was very good. I think he's not being talked about enough in terms of, Big Ten running backs this past season and potentially in the NFL draft as well. Greg Schiano has come in and become a stabilizing force for this institution, which is a very good thing for this institution to have, okay? And it's also turned into a team that should be consistently competing for bowl game appearances. And when you look at this past season, you start off 4-0 with wins against Howard, Akron, and surprisingly, a win against Virginia Tech that I don't think people talk about enough in terms of out-of-conference games. That was a big win for this program and for the Big Ten as a whole. You then, let's be real, upset Washington at home the next week. That was a big game as well for you guys as well, proving that you can play at that level. Then you lose for the first time against Nebraska the following week, and that's a tough one. You lose in blowout fashion to a Wisconsin team that didn't even make a bowl game. So that's not great either. And then you lose to a UCLA team that you could have beat. You could have won that game. You lose to USC on the road. That's a tough game going across the conference. I get it. Beat Minnesota at home. Tough team, Minnesota. We're going to talk about them on Friday. But tough team this past year. Won that game. That was another big win. Beat Maryland. That was a big win as well to become bowl eligible. You lose in a close game against Illinois, which is surprising because Illinois was really good last season. And then you blow out a Michigan State team to end the regular season. You then, in the bowl game, lose a very close game to Kansas State. Could have won that game if you made another couple of plays on defense here or there, but doesn't particularly matter. 7-6 is a good year. That's a good quality year for this program. It's on the upswing. What it needs now is consistency. And Greg Schiano is a real football coach. He failed in the NFL because he didn't have a quarterback, and that's what always happens with coaches in the NFL. You either have a quarterback and you're a good coach, or you don't have a quarterback and you're a bad coach. Case in point, Bill Belichick. Nevertheless, you, I believe, are going to get that consistency. I do think this is going to be a team, maybe not next year, because you kind of got a rough draw next year in terms of who you're playing. But with an upset here or there that well-coached teams with inferior talent often kind of do, yeah, You can get there next year as well. You could go 7-5 next year. You could talk me into that. We're not going to get into the specifics of that. We'll save that for the looking forward part of this video. But as far as this season went, this was a good season. I don't really think you can look at this and say this was a bad season, especially considering where the standards of the program are at right now. Now, maybe it's time to raise the standards of the program a little bit to, oh, maybe we'll make a bowl game, like maybe once every 3 years and have like a solid season, but then the other 2 years doesn't really matter because we're building to be able to get to that point. Or you should change that to maybe, no, we should be making bowl games every year, and our building year is to like 8 or 9 wins in the regular season. That might be time to raise the standards a little bit. But as far as this season goes, this was a B season. This was a good season, okay? If you had managed to have beaten a Kansas State in the bowl game, this B probably goes to an A-. If you had managed to beat, UCLA or a Nebraska or pull off a major upset against an Illinois or something like that, then that probably A- goes into full-blown an A+. If you had gotten to 9 wins this year through the extra bowl game win and one more regular season game, that's an A+ season for you guys. And you were pretty close. You probably could have and should have beaten UCLA, and you were right there with Kansas State as well. That was not an unwinnable football game. So, yeah, all things considered, this was a good season. And you were very, very close to having a great season as well. Looking forward here, you actually did some interesting stuff in the offseason. You've got your starting quarterback coming back. You brought in C.J. Campbell as a transfer from Florida Atlantic as a running back, which Michigan was interested in bringing him in, okay, before he committed to Rutgers, and then they kind of pivoted to Justice Hayes. So that tells you a lot about C.J. Campbell, because Michigan has been very, very good at picking players in the transfer portal. You've got some solid talent on the offensive line coming back. I think you're replacing 3 starters, but the other 2 starters were very, very good this past season. I think this could be another year where you maybe go 6-6, 7-5 again. Until, maybe you look at the schedule and realize that it's kind of a lot more difficult than it was last year. So you look at the out-of-conference schedule: Ohio, Miami of Ohio, Norfolk State. Now, Ohio's a real program. You're not going to win that game just because you play in the Power 5 and they play in the Group of 5, okay? Ohio's a real football team with a real football coach, all right? So I still think you should win that game, okay? But that might be closer than some people are anticipating. Miami of Ohio, similar story, although not to the degree of Ohio, in my opinion. Should win that game. Norfolk State, that's a W. You start Big Ten play at a home game with Iowa. We don't know what Iowa's going to look like. Defense took a massive step backwards. They were still good to great, borderline, but they were not elite. Maybe they get back to form on that side of the ball. Maybe they don't. Maybe there's still cracks in the armor that you can exploit. And we don't know what the offense is going to look like right now. I know they brought in a transfer quarterback, but that's not a game where it's out of the possibility for you to win. At Minnesota, don't really know what Minnesota's going to look like either. There's not a whole lot returning there. But that could be a winnable game as well. Let's say you split Iowa and Minnesota. That puts you at 4-1, heading on the road after a bye week to Washington. If you didn't have the bye week, I'd be very, very, very confident Washington was going to win this game. I think Washington's going to take a step forward next year. I really, really like their quarterback that they've got stepping up as a true sophomore, I believe. Really, really like that kid. However, you do have the bye week, and that makes it slightly more interesting. However, I'm going to lean towards taking an L there. Oregon at home, also probably an L. On the road at Purdue, I'm thinking that's probably a W. So that's 5-3. On the road at Illinois, tough game. I think Illinois is going to be really, really good. I think they have the best quarterback in the Big Ten returning this year in Luke Altmaier. Yes, I think he's better than Drew Allar. No, that isn't a hot take. If you watched either of those teams play, Luke Altmaier is a better quarterback than Drew Aller. He's not a better NFL prospect than Drew Aller, but he's a better quarterback at the collegiate level, at least based off of last year's film. Probably an L. At home versus Maryland, that's the game of the season. That's the 50-50 game. I don't know what Maryland's going to look like, but they got this super talented freshman quarterback, top 50 recruit coming in that I think is probably going to start right away. If not, he'll definitely be playing at this point in the season. So you don't really know with somebody that talented. That could be a very, very interesting game. If you win that game, all of a sudden you're 6-4, you're making the bowl game because you're not winning your last two games, either at Ohio State home versus Penn State. Probably not getting W's in that game. So 6-6 is pretty realistic. It's also probably the ceiling for this team next year. As rough as that might sound, it's just kind of the reality of where this program is right now. But that's just me, and what do I know? I'm just some asshole on the internet giving you his opinion. So at this point, I'm going to remind you to like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and if you disagreed with me at any point, or you just have something to say, go ahead and drop a comment down in the comment section below. And now with the outro done and out of the way, there's only one thing left to say, and that's that I'll see you next time.